Hey, Assalamu alaikum everyone. So today I want to introduce the subject of the self, meaning who am I? Who are you? Concept of the self can be either enigmatic or either very confusing. And I think the best way to understand it is to start with components of the concept of the self. And there is the easiest way to embrace it is to think about yourself as a concoction of biology, emotions, cognition, spirituality, and all of those together they compose yourself. Now, self can also be influenced, meaning you, the way you experience yourself, can be hugely influenced on the spectrum of your life experience. So let's start with conditioning. Let's start with your early years experiences. This is very crucial because by the time we're 7, our brains are like sponges, so we absorb any informations about ourselves. So whatever your primary carers, your early environment believed about yourself, by the time you're 7, it was your reality. Now, at around 2 or 3 years old, we also realize that we are separate to others. So we embracing the idea of individuality. We're coming out from the notion that we are part with a mother, uh, integral part with the mother or with primary carers, and we coming out from idea that we are uh, in part with community or with communal experience of brothers, sisters, and so forth. And we're starting to conceptualize the idea of who am I as an individual. And for early age, uh, as a human, we can probably produce sentence, well, I am 2 years old or 3 years old, and I'm a boy or a girl. And I have a mother and I have a father. So that is how early our concept of the self starts speaking to us from within. Now, culture, in a sense, can influence yourself as well. And the reason why I say it can, because it's actually a beautiful balance of individuality and communal feeling. So as a self, you can experience yourself as a strong individual, not dependent or responsible to others, or quite opposite. You might experience yourself as a part of a bigger picture, full of roles and responsibilities and codependency. And that's probably hugely factored by your background, your cultural background, your economics and social level background as well. The, the biggest, the huge influence on yourself is probably psychology of your brain. And what I mean by that, we tend to create an image of ourselves to others, meaning some people, we allow some people to see certain qualities about us. We present ourselves in a certain way. And that is something that we consciously are prepared to show to others, but also consciously we hiding a few things from others. There is even deeper level of self-concept, self-relationship with yourself, and that is hidden aspects of yourself from not others but from yourself. So on some subconscious level we don't really know ourselves that well, and this is probably where psychotherapeutic psychological therapy comes in place. This is probably the moment when some signs or some deep conversations with your friends or beloved ones actually have a meaning, very challenging as it is, but they actually opening you up to understanding that there's more to you than you thought, because people can see you for a different image than you create for yourself. So we create an ideal image of ourselves, and it normally stems from ambitions or how we care that others perceive us. But also we can create a self-image which is real. All this image can come back to us by interactions with others. So sometimes we are aware, and most of the times we are aware who we really are to others, how we impact others, how others experience us in intimate or maybe not intimate relationship with us. So as you can hear, it's fascinating. The concept of the self, the angles that we can approach this concept are so broad. So right now, I'm asking you to actually take a test. You can share it with us. And by the way, give me a thumbs up, give me a heart, let me know if you're here. If you have questions, don't forget, I'm here to help. You can either, if you're rewatching, ask me the questions and the videos, or maybe right now something flares up in you, some questions. By all means, I welcome you to open a conversation. So before you do that, take a pen, take a minute, take a paper, and write down a sentence. Who am I? Right? So the first question, let me write it down. The first question's who am I? Right? And don't think much about it, just write a sentence, right? Now, the second question you want to ask yourself is how I see myself. Again, don't think much about it, just write it down. Salam alaikum, Rami. Yeah, the subject of today is the concept of the self. Hi, Matthew. I'm glad to see you here. I hope you're catching up. Now, the third question you want to ask yourself is, what do I think about myself? Yeah. The fourth question you want to ask yourself, how do I value myself? All right, so let me give you a few seconds. It's only 4 questions. It's only 4 questions. Don't think much about it. Let your subconscious decide on the answers, right? And now, when I assume you are ready, let me tell you what you've just done for yourself. So, the way we approach ourselves, the way we think of ourselves, gradually changes over the time. So you see the evolution, if you like, of your relationship with yourself, of your understanding of yourself. There is a beautiful Arabic saying or hadith that says, "Know yourself, know your Lord." So the more you do work on yourself, the more you understand where you're coming from, what values you appreciate in life and in yourself, how other might experience you, and what's the distance between your ideal vision of yourself and the reality of you. The more work you do on yourself, you gradually grow, and you change those answers. All those false answers, they should by default change as you grow. So in other words, we never say the same story about our life experiences, because we never the same. There is another beautiful saying in Polish culture: you can never go into the same river twice, right? So because the river flows. So that's the same thing with the concept of yourself. You are in a constant flux, you're constantly changing, you're constantly growing. So all those questions which you ask yourself, which you allow your subconscious just give an answer to, they will not be the same tomorrow. And I bet any money that they've never actually been the same, I don't know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, because you know yourself better. Does it make sense? So if you ask yourself a question, how do I see myself? You've actually, hi Muna, I'm so glad you're here. Let me see if you have a question. My problem is maladaptive daydreaming up to that extent that it disturbs my practical life. It's maladaptive daydreaming. So it sounds, Muna, like you're disassociating yourself from the reality, from the present moment, and that probably is your protective mechanism. That is probably your defense from something. I invite you all to a session one-to-one with me if you really want to know yourself on that level. But if you feel open enough, you can expand this idea, expand this thought with me here, and let's see if I can help you. But let's go back maybe to this homework that I set up for you. So if you answered the question, how I see myself, what your subconscious should do, it should show you, your answer should show you whether you approach yourself from the position of idealistic idea of yourself or from the realistic. The more your answers are based on reality, how others experiencing you, how well you're prepared to hear about yourself, the more developed you are. The more you are stuck in idealistic version of yourself, and that's normally ambitions or self-delusions, the more indication you have that you have to put more work in yourself. That's not to say there is any pathology in you, but just to say that because you are a person of growth, it's one of your, let's call it psychological self-care methods, and perhaps wellness duties to sit down and think, hold on, what's going on here for me? Another question was what do I value myself for, right? So just look at your answers and try to see how strong would be your self-worth concept in that answer, or self-esteem, right? Do you approach yourself from positive or negative perspective? And that takes me back to conditioning. Many of us, and that's probably a subject for another live session, but let me just quickly throw it on the table. Many of us, we hear voices in our head, and I don't mean in pathological way. I mean, we hold this belief system from our childhood. We hear voices of our parents telling us, oh, you're just like this, or you're always like this, you should have, you could have. Parents or primary carers, or maybe a very tough primary school teacher, or a tough religious teacher. It doesn't really matter, but all of us, to a certain degree, we hold those voices in our head. Salam alaikum, Talia. I'm so glad you are here. Let me just finish that thought, and I come back to your question. So, so when you were answering the question, how do you value yourself? You either spoken from the place when you hold your own belief system, when you already done some work on yourself, and you reflected on how others are experiencing you here right now in your adult life, or you've either answered that question from the past when your child who received certain informations about himself, about herself, was speaking for you when you were answering that question. And how I'm not confusing you, I really hope it's clear. This concept, this self-work is really deep. So I'm not using any jargons here. I'm trying to make it as plain as possible. Let me come to Talia, because she might have an interesting question for all of us. What if most of the answers for the questions are negative? Like I feel very often lost, don't know what to do, when to go, who I am for myself and others. Thank you so much, Talia, for your openness and for the courage to share it with others. Can I just put your mind on rest that you're actually not isolated in this experience? I mean, if you were go to GP or maybe open up yourself at that level to others, they might say, you might experience depression. And that might be the case, but I don't like giving labels, and that's not how I'm going to answer this question. I'm going to answer your question from the perspective of theory of the self. So you say that you feel very often lost and you don't know what to do and where to go. Who are you, and who I'm for myself and others. So it sounds like you are yourself in the stage of confusion. And it sounds like yourself finds difficult to not only relate to others, but for most to itself. And that's why you mention loss. So there is a void in you, probably, and it's a shame I can't exchange your experiences on live, but perhaps you want to take it to your private session with me. You're most welcome. But that feeling of loss that you have might also be on a very spiritual level. So it's not only the case that you emotionally or cognitively experiencing the self, it could also be on the spiritual level. In Arabic, we call it fitra. And in English, it is translated into a natural innate concept. Innate meaning it's like a birthright. We've been born with it. So it's natural, innate concept of ourself that is longing for something, longing for somebody, longing to belong to a bigger concept than ourselves. So perhaps at that very moment, your spiritual self is neglected. Your spiritual self might be in silence for some time, and maybe you need to do some work in that concept. You also say that you experiencing all those answers to those questions from the very negative perspective. So let me pose this question: Are those negative answers are yours, or are they borrowed from others? Meaning, is it something that you would expect from your parents to say to you when you were a child, or maybe right now when you are adult? Is it something that you actually think of yourself now as a mature person? Because very often what happens in our psyche, we don't understand how to work on ourselves, we don't have knowledge, we don't have support, and we drag those negative experiences from past and we are stuck with them up to the present. So perhaps what you're hearing is that the voices from the past. One of the theories in psychology, they call them shadow selves. So maybe it is the case of you, Talia, when you actually need to sit down and face them, look in the mirror. And this job is very, very deep, very challenging. And I suggest that for any one of us who experience at any degree something what Talia described for herself, to reach out and get help, to actually seriously consider that I'm here vulnerable, and give yourself a right. I have a right to be vulnerable. It is my self-concept that needs working, and if I don't sort it out, I will stay in that stage of, let's call it depression or lostness. Your spiritual level is feeling lost or unheard of. So I hope it helps, Talia. If not, by all means, ex, ex, explain me or maybe explore that subject with me here live. I welcome you to one with me. So the self-concept is so important, as we noticed, because it speaks to us from the place of subconscious. And nowadays we tend to give labels to us. Oh, you are anxious, or you're depressed, or you experience OCD. But really, the crook of the matter in working on yourself is to look for roots. And the roots are most of the time self-neglect and almost 100% of the time lack of self-knowledge. So that's why I so appreciate this Arabic saying, know yourself, know your Lord. Why Lord? So as I've mentioned, your self is on the journey. Your self will develop. Your concept of knowing yourself, your relationship with yourself will only enhance with time. If you neglect it, you will experience symptoms of dysfunctional thinking, dysfunctional belief about yourself, and dysfunctional relationships. But if you enhance it, if you do work on it, what happens, your answers to those questions, who am I? They will change, and you will grow from naming yourself, describing yourself from just gender or age or body type or roles that you play, meaning I'm a son, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, and they will grow into awareness of what are your moral conducts, what are your moral characteristics, which we call adab in Arabic. And in modern world, we probably cross it with ethics and maybe personality traits. So when your answers come from that point where you know whether you are introvert or extrovert, whether you are agreeable or I don't know, melancholic or phlegmatic, and so forth. When you answer those questions from the perspective of individual self-knowingness, then it's a sign that you're actually moving up. And where up is up, where the up is finished, and it finishes actually on spiritual awakening. This is when that fitna, that natural inclination to you says, hold on a moment, you know yourself to a certain degree, you know you have responsibilities to society, to community, to your family, you know also yourself, but there's much more to that. That's why I'm letting you know that you're missing out on something. So statistically, it happens around your 20. So if you ignore it and you say to yourself, "Oh, it must be my career," this concept will let you continue silencing it for another 20 years. And when you're 40, you probably accomplished. You have your family, you have your riches, you have your accomplishments, and yourself starts speaking to you again, and you're experiencing crisis. But it doesn't have to be a case of crisis, because what happens is your spiritual self needs looking after. And your spiritual self develops on three different levels, right? In Arabic, we call it lawama, amara, and mutamina. So the first stage is when you are in a headlessness, when you are numbed to the idea of that fact that you are a spiritual being. You go through life, you do what you need to do, what is written for you, what society, what peer pressure expect from you, but then you still feel loneliness. And if you respond to that loneliness, if you start contemplating, reading, researching, finding yourself surrounding by other people, you have a new friends, then you're going on to the second stage, which is being openness, which is being reflective, which is probably the point when you, I don't know, maybe embrace even therapy for yourself, right? Or you go to couple counseling because you try to sort out this relationship, something is not working for you. And then something happened to you. You stop thinking of yourself as moral or conduct or ethics or personality. You recognize that actually you are a small concept if you were to compare yourself to the highest force that created you. So many cultures, many religions, they all have their definitions. Uh, Probably the most universal definition would be God. Uh, for those of us who wants to stay more neutral, they would call it higher force. Um, for those of us who still stay on the ground that there's no higher force, we will call it Mother Nature. So it doesn't really matter. The concept is that we grow as a self, and on spiritual level we grow as well, and that is the last station of your self-development. So I hope it's helpful. I hope you've actually learned something. Do let me know if there's anything I need to clarify for you. Don't forget to visit my website, www.ajstherapy.com, for freebies, for articles, for blogs, and for opportunity to meet with me one-to-one. Thank you very much for watching, and Salam Alaikum for now.